Hello, everybody. My conversation today is with my friend Mike Davis. I met Mike through the small church that we both attend here in Bastrop County. We cover a lot of topics in this conversation. Mike is an introvert by nature, so I've gotten to know Mike outside of that context decently well. Something I appreciate about him is how much of a truth seeker he is. I had a lot of conversation points with him, things that we had never really talked about before. We covered his childhood, being raised in a big family. He's one of 12 siblings. We talked about how he and his wife met, how they shared their first kiss on their wedding day. We talked about the importance of raising kids and being on the same page with your spouse about the way that you want to raise them. We talked about things like friendship and forgiveness. We talked about the benefit of having a religious framework for how you build a country. And we talked about learning from failure and many, many other topics. But with that said, I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with my good friend, Mike Davis. All right, now it's time to ruin your burgeoning political career.
Let's do it.
Why do you want to go into politics?
I feel like I should, or almost have an obligation to.
It's not as much of a want.
Oh, for sure. Who would want to these days?
Who would want to these days? Yeah, this is a topic that I have discussed at length with close friends of mine, because what used to be the case is people saw public service as service to their community.
Right.
And they signed up for it begrudgingly. They hated the thought of doing it. They hated the thought of what it would take to get the office in the first place, and then what it would take to work it well up to their standards.
Right.
And then the moment they were done with it, back to the farm.
Yeah.
But yet we've gotten way, way far away from that. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty content person. So I know my financial goals, and I've been super blessed with my mentors and my family. And so I kind of feel an obligation to give back eventually. But at some point it's I don't need more. I don't need more money. I don't need more power. I don't need more people to know about me.
Yeah.
It's almost like the more successful I am, the less I want people to know about me. And so to me, that attitude, you get people like that in there that just want to be servants and don't want power or control. That's healthy, and that's how you avoid the, billionaires lobbying and influencing everything so strongly. So I won't do it until I'm financially independent.
Yeah.
I won't take lobbying money. But it's hard because I'm a policy nerd about federal politics, and you start out at the state level. I have no idea. Mayor of Bastrop would be a big deal, but I have no idea what the mayor does even. So,
right. Well, how much do you interact with the mayor of your county or of the city that you're a part of? Do you ever get involved in county politics?
No.
Or have a need to go sit in a county commissioner meeting or something?
No, I should, but we've talked about growing up, I wanted to be part of a group so bad, and so now it's I immediately kind of want to rebel and don't want to be part of any group. It's
Right.
I'd run as an independent. So
Yeah. You're an independent-minded person. That's something I recognized about you from very, very early on, is you don't talk a lot, which is a good thing. And the things that you do have opinions on, you can articulate the opposing position very well.
that's important.
Most people don't do that well. You have your way of thinking about the world. That's the lens you see everything through. It makes it easy for you to make decisions. We talked about this a bunch, but that sort of easy button thinking, well, I know I think this way, so here's my answer to all the tough questions, so I don't have to grapple with them. But you're pretty good at articulating the opposing viewpoint.
But you need that for most things. It was Steve Jobs wore the same thing every day. I wear a V-neck to work every day. I don't have to think about it. Most decisions in your life you don't want to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, the important ones, you should know the other side.
So do you feel like the obligation, I won't say obligation, the responsibility to go into a political career, if you get to that point, stems from that being the area where you can bring the most good given your skill set? What makes you think that's the path?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it, but probably. I mean, I'm an attorney. I've told you before, I think it's a problem when our leadership is not sometimes. Now, I think you can be a great leader without it,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to have thought about some of this stuff. Either that or just have a great team that sort of puts the boundaries where they need to be.
For the policy piece of it, you mean?
Yeah, and like I'm not going to be a social media influencer or something. Like those people make a big difference sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seems like for my skill set, the way I could make the biggest impact,
Yeah.
and it's just important to me. Real basic principles like representative government and some form of liberty. I just think are key for humans to be happy.
Yeah. What were you like as a kid?
Super introverted, shy.
Shocking.
I mean, I was homeschooled, so that was a challenge.
Yeah. You were homeschooled all the way through until all the way through high school, no?
Yep.
You were raised, we talked about this a little bit yesterday at small group, which I guess we could say how we know each other. That's when I got to Smithville. My wife and I had a tough time finding a church home. And when we found the church that we all go to, we recognized it just felt a little bit more like a home church to us. And then we were fortunate enough to meet some people that we really liked. I got a chance to visit with Phil a handful of times over coffee and really kind of share with him my aversion to some of the churches we had gone to. Because I didn't want to be involved in a church that I didn't like the people and didn't recognize there were real people there, And I think you and I had some kind of shared experience there. So you were raised, remind me the church you were raised in.
So I think my parents met at A&M and got involved in Maranatha, which was a pretty big organization at the time. It was a non-denominational evangelical church. My understanding is that the branch in Austin sort of folded when they had a big balloon payment on their building and had a bunch of students in the church that didn't tithe that much, so they ran out of money. And then my parents' church was a home church that formed out of that. The pastor is my dad's best friend, and he was the drummer at Maranatha. So it was pretty, I don't know if charismatic's probably the word, some speaking in tongues, a lot of praying for God to heal people. And then separate from that, we homeschooled, and we were part of this group, ATI, that probably a cult. We were only in that for a couple of years, but I was exposed to that. And basically, there's a documentary like Shiny, Happy, Beautiful People or something. Anyway, it was like, a bunch of homeschoolers, and it was like, raise your kids this way. This is how you dress. Like, I think guys wore slacks and button-down shirts, and the girls, didn't wear pants, always wore dresses and had long hair and things like that. And it's super attractive to homeschool parents in particular, because like if they tell you like, hey, raise your kids this way and they'll be great kids. And like for people that like following rules, that's like super attractive. So I get it. I think we were in it for a couple of years, and my dad sort of realized it's sort of extra biblical and wasn't that great for our family. So
you're the oldest of several siblings, right?
Yeah.
How many kids?
12.
12 kids.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't have that much to say. There's always somebody else talking.
Yeah. Yeah. So being raised in a what did you call it? The kind of church that you went to.
Yeah, a little charismatic.
Charismatic church. As an introverted kid.
So a bunch of that didn't make sense to me, and a bunch of church doesn't make sense to me now in different ways that we can talk about.
But
we also visited lots of kinds of churches. So, I've been to churches where they do even more charismatic, where they do victory laps while they're singing, which is kind of cool. You get exercise and church together.
Yeah,
so
you can see it that way.
I thought it was weird at the time, but now I'm like, I have trouble sitting down and doing this. Like when you want to hang out, I want to hike or work out or something. So,
right.
And then we've been to, Lutheran and Methodist, and extended family is some of that. So that, I mean, that is more appealing to an introvert, right? Because it's sort of solemn and there's tradition.
Yeah.
But then I'm just like, the Bible's pretty simple, and like, why do you need all this extra stuff? And why do you need to be part of a group? And so that high church doesn't make sense either. Um, yeah, and then like if you can't do an experiment and use a scientific method to know something, I'm probably not gonna believe it myself. And so figuring out how that works with faith is tricky and everything.
Yeah.
But
How do you square that with the concept of God that you can't prove scientifically?
yeah, I mean, I think there is some of that in faith of like you obey what you think is right and you see how that goes. Um, and yeah, I don't like the word relationship. My wife and I always talk about that. But
You don't like the word relationship?
no, because I don't know exactly what it means, and it's not in the Bible a lot. But yeah, sort of that. The scientific method is just doing the same thing and seeing the same result and building that correlation. So I see a lot of that. But yeah, so it's hard when you're in a more charismatic church where people are saying, God told me this a lot. And I've talked to them since then about what that actually means. But, as a kid, you're not sure.
Yeah.
And then now, I've done a lot of school, and it just doesn't make sense to me, the sort of lecture style. I don't think anybody thinks that's a good way to learn. But my wife is like all about the community part of church, which makes a ton of sense. But then it's like, why are we all sitting down for an hour plus listening to one person talk? It's like, it's Philip. He's great. He's super entertaining, wiser than me. I learned from it. But I don't think that's necessarily the best way to learn. It would be more of like asking questions or like, where's the test afterwards?
Right. So do you believe in the community element of church?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, like getting together and listening to somebody, that's not community. And then, I struggle with small talk, so I'm kind of saying hey to a few people. I mean, I still, like every week, I feel like I meet great people at church that, I'm just the guy that like stands in the corner and doesn't really talk to anybody afterwards.
Yeah.
And picks up my kids and it's like, no, I don't hate this. I don't know.
Yeah. It's just not your style of community building, which I get. You make a good point there, that if the community element is what you're after and going into church, well, then everybody's sitting in lines facing the same direction, listening to one leader talk is not really conducive to that community building.
Sure.
But it gives you the frequency of getting together and seeing the friendly faces, and I guess worshiping in community is part of it.
Just a reminder of a lot of things too, because you forget.
Yeah.
Habits you should be building, but maybe you aren't.
Sure.
That kind of thing.
Do you have any, this is a topic that's come up in here a couple of times, but in your, say, faith experience, you ever heard God speak?
So not that I'm sure of. It's funny, the only time I can think of maybe, we really struggled to get pregnant the first time. I have 2 kids. The oldest is 7. And I was actually in church one time, and I felt like God said, this is the month you're finally going to get pregnant. And it was.
Audibly? You felt like you heard that happen?
No, just in my head.
Yeah.
And so that was cool. I'm like, why that? It wasn't like I needed to do anything differently to prepare for that or anything.
Yeah.
But, given that I would love to hear more, I am going to hold on to that and look for that again.
Do you know anybody that has that experience of having heard an audible, like, I heard this thing today and I acted on it and I know for sure it was God speaking to me?
So my home pastor, I don't want to misquote him, but I'll do my best to be accurate. I think he's prophesied in the sense of felt like God told him something to tell to someone, and it was very relevant and accurate and helpful for them. And I trust him because he's also told me like, hey, it's been 2 years since or more since I felt any of that, and just super honest and like, I want that again. I don't know why. I don't know how it works. So that's cool. I also know a lot of people that have other experiences that I don't trust. So
yeah, that's when the topic has come up in here before. That's been sort of the nature of it. Is like I was raised in church. I was raised in private school. I was raised in going to chapel once a week, going to youth group Wednesday night, going to Sunday school, going to Sunday church, community meetings, all that kind of stuff. And you interact with people in that context, and you very often find what a young justice-seeking mind would register as fraudulence.
Sure.
Right? And like, I see this person on this day and I know who they are, and then I see them on this day and it's a totally different human. And, you know, I'm not going to get a consistent version of you. That's a problem for a kid that is just looking for truth.
Yep. No, I struggle going too far the other way. Like, I love the Jackass movies. I mean,
Yeah.
they make me laugh like crazy. And there's so much of like sheltering your kids these days.
Yeah.
Not just Christian stuff. It's just like, they're kids, like, you should shelter them. And so there's this balance of like, I can't wait to watch those movies with my kids. It'll probably be way too early.
Yeah.
But that's better than like being fake and sheltering them. So.
Well, because the sheltering, you recognize that there's going to come a day when that kid is going to get out in the real world.
For sure.
Whatever that real world is. And that if you have not equipped them for the things that they're going to face by having them face those things in a somewhat safe context,
right.
Well, the moment they get a chance to go wild, they're going to go wild.
Yeah.
That was my experience.
The internet and social media. I mean, I was just young enough for AOL Instant Messenger and all that.
Me too.
Like, I was going to Google something if my parents didn't give me a good enough answer. So,
yeah. Yeah, man. So I brought Austin Pilot in here.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about addictions and sort of his experience all through college. You know, he had several experiences in college that led him to believe I probably shouldn't be drinking anymore. Yeah. My experiences, I never really had an affinity for alcohol. Like, I was not homeschooled all being raised, but I might as well have been. Yeah. Like, the shelteredness of a tiny private school was only offset for me by getting to my sophomore year of high school and going to a bigger school and recognizing like, oh, I'm going to get out in the real world and need to be able to operate, but very sheltered. The thing that kept me from drinking in college was playing baseball in college and being a relief pitcher. So I never knew when I was going to play. And then, you know, like, okay, if I don't know when I'm going to play, I definitely can't be hungover because I have to be able to perform. I think that's what kept me from alcohol. But what it didn't keep me from was being inquisitive with the internet.
Sure.
And, you know, in my parents' defense, they never used the internet prior to us having it in our home. And when you're a kid that already has a susceptibility to being inquisitive, because I'm that way too, I like to question things. And then you give that kid the internet, some stuff's going to happen. Oh, yeah. You're going to stumble across some things that get your heart rate going. And you're like, man, what was that I found? And man, I mean, not to overshare, but I was introduced to porn when I was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And struggled with it my entire life into adulthood, well into adulthood. And, you know, it's of all the things to be addicted to, sexual addiction is one that you can probably mask more than others, sure. Right? Like a food addiction is going to show up in your waistline. A drug addiction is going to show up, you know, in your hair falling out and teeth falling out. Alcohol addictions, people are going to smell it on you. But a sexual addiction, it has all the characteristics of an alcohol addiction and a food addiction, where sexual, having a context for it, like there is a proper context and there's an improper context, whereas alcohol, you can just avoid altogether because there's not a proper context for it. But
no, I think all of us want to teach our kids a healthy way to view sex. And
how do you even navigate that with having your kids be open to the internet?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, mine don't have phones and don't have computers. My oldest is 7. He's probably been on the internet that I don't know, but he's still learning to spell. So yeah, I got like a year or 2 before. But yeah, I mean, for us, it's living in the country is nice because it's like the animals are all doing it. So we talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to talk with my oldest when he was like 5. I just feel like earlier is better because I didn't get it early enough, I don't think.
I for sure didn't get it early enough. And I think it does stunt you a little bit as you get older and you sort of figure it out for yourself. Yeah, Ash and I have talked about this a lot lately.
I want to step back too because
Okay.
this is really important for how I talk to my kids about sex. But we're having this conversation and we both go to church, but the majority of my friends don't, and a lot of them have some kind of faith and some of them don't. But it's just super important to me to be able to talk about things through whatever lens, wherever somebody's at. And for it's relevant to my kids because who knows where they're going to be at with their faith or whatever they believe. And so I want to impart any truth that I can for whatever stage they're at. And so, I mean, going back to sex, I was homeschooled. More weird things like my wife and I's first kiss was at our wedding. I've never slept with anyone except my wife. I think I dated 3 or 4 people, and such cool people. Good for them putting up with that.
Yeah.
I had no personality, so they must have thought I was really good looking or was going to make a lot of money or something.
There had to be something.
Something.
It definitely wasn't personality.
So
your
anyway,
first kiss was at your wedding.
Yeah.
Man, that's wild.
Part of that was there was the whole purity culture movement and that cult that my wife was also in that for longer than I was. I call it a cult. I mean, what's the difference between a religion and a cult? It's whether it's socially accepted or not. But anyway, so I have all of that, and there's weird stuff about that, and super unhealthy attitudes that I had where it was selfishness on my part of oh, I have these standards or something, and pride, and that's worthless. But I guess my parents did teach me some really good stuff as far as I was just thinking about the person I was dating and their future spouse and my future spouse and how would those people want me to act in this situation. That's a healthy thing. And thinking about when I get married, will I be able to trust myself? Because I mean, I feel like you have more chances to cheat when you're married than beforehand. So those are all good motivations to view relationships, and then also when you're married, sex is awesome, but you have to be friends the rest of the time too. So learning how to be friends with girls is, I tell and I didn't do it. I met Elizabeth and we were married a year later. But I tell my kids if you can just be friends with somebody for a long time, that's awesome.
That's the ideal.
So yeah, but trying to get those concepts in with the internet and everything. Yeah, I remember I was being 8 or 9 and hey, you can go on eBay and search for bikini pictures. This is amazing. And the old CRT screen and the dial-up modem. Good times.
Where it loads a line at a time.
Yeah. And then now we know more and more about dopamine and people are addicted to different things and what that does to your brain and everything.
Yeah.
But there's also that, I remember just years of my life just having guilt all the time. And I don't think that's a biblical thing or a healthy thing from a non-Christian perspective either.
Yeah.
And it's tough because I feel balance is important in everything. But in pornography specifically, I don't know that there's a balance there of some healthy amount of use or something. That's for me, that's not the way to go.
Yeah, that's an interesting element of porn use compared to other substances you could find yourself addicted to.
Right, alcohol, I want to teach people how to use it in a healthy way, right?
Yeah. I can sit down and have a little sipper of tequila and have maybe 2 of them, and I'm done. I don't want to drink any more of that. And sitting around a campfire with a little sipper of tequila enhances a campfire experience. I enjoy that. But I also don't have that susceptibility to going over the edge. But is there a sipper of tequila equivalent to porn use? For me, there's not.
Yeah, I don't know of one.
Because I have a susceptibility to it. But, for an alcoholic, having the sipper of tequila around the campfire is a deal breaker too.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, now that I'm married, I feel like I try to channel that into a good direction of like, wow, she's really cute. I'm sure her husband enjoys that. Man, my wife's hot. I can't wait to see her tonight.
Yeah. Where she just,
the mentality has
she's
shifted.
the only outlet.
But a high school kid or whatever, I don't know where you take that. So
yeah, it's a tough one. What would you say to a parent? Maybe not to a parent. What would you say to somebody that would make the argument that sexual chemistry is an important part of marriage, and that if you don't know if you have sexual chemistry with somebody because you haven't even kissed them until your wedding day, then what happens if you kiss that person on your wedding day and you realize, man, I don't have it for this person?
Right.
Then what? Do you have an argument?
No, I got lucky, so
Yeah.
I acknowledge that's a real thing, right? So I don't know.
Do you think it was harder for you to remain that way until your wedding day, or your wife?
Probably me. I think it's harder for guys. Guys are just more visual, but I don't know. I dated more people, and she lived with her parents for longer, so those things help.
Yeah.
But
y'all met when you were how old?
21-ish.
So still in college.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you were married. Were you still in college when you were married?
Yeah, so I graduated, we got married and went on our honeymoon, and I started law school the day we got back.
Gotcha. And you were in law school for how long prior to starting practicing?
So it was 3 years.
All at UT?
Mm-hmm. So it's good. I mean, we were broke for 3 years, lived in an apartment, had that experience. Had trouble having kids, but then we got to spend more time with each other. And, those days when like we thought we were busy, like what a joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like come home from school and, she was working horses and we'd cook dinner and just hang out. That was awesome.
3 years of that. And then did you start practicing right after college, or did you have time?
Yeah. No, I'm super grateful for the firm that I'm at. I worked for them the summer before law school, during law school part-time, and then just kind of hit the ground running. I've been there 10 or 11 years.
And your specialty is?
Patent law.
Patent law.
Electrical engineering specifically.
Is that from an interest? Like, what got you into patent law and electrical engineering to begin with?
Interest in what I'm good at, but my dad does the same thing. So
I gotcha.
I didn't think I would do the same thing, but there's probably some genetic aptitude and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've worked at Intel as an intern, and I'm sort of a short-term goals kind of person. So like working on a piece of a project for 3 years was not really my thing. And so, the patent stuff, I get a great idea. Well, most of the time it's great ideas. Sometimes you roll your eyes at what people are trying to patent, but I do work with some of the smartest people in the world, and I get a new invention every week or so and get to learn about it. And I'm super curious like you are. So yeah, I'm just getting to learn every day on the job is pretty neat.
You feel like that's something you'll do for the rest of your professional life until a political career, if that's where God has you, or is that something you'll do for this phase and then you've got other interests outside of it?
Probably. I mean, I get really into different hobbies and stuff, so I spent a lot of time on investing and stuff. And for a while, there's a whole, I think it's the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And so I was making plans for how early I could retire. But and I could keep myself busy if I retired right now for the rest of my life easily. But I think it's a great job that I get a lot of meaning out of. So right now I plan to do it as long as I can, maybe transition more and more part-time as other things come up. And I guess if I run for office, I got to quit.
Yeah. What does retirement look like for you? If you're financially independent and you retire from practicing early, do you just go directly into another career, or do you have aspirations for retirement, like what you'd want to spend your time doing?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of disc golf and reading. My wife has 15 horses, so like I can't keep up with the work right now. So I could spend 15 or 20 hours a week just on keeping fences up and mowing and moving poop around. But yeah, I think I don't know. I could keep myself busy, but I think I might get bored too.
Tell me about your parents. Who do you favor more, your dad or your mom?
I don't know either one. Favor in terms of which one am I more like? Yeah, I mean, my dad's more extroverted than me, so maybe my mom. We're both quieter, more anxious sometimes. Uh, but yeah, I'd come home from school and just talk to her for hours sometimes and still do.
Are they still, both of them still alive?
Yep.
Where do they live?
Austin.
They're in
Yeah.
Austin.
So I see my dad once a week. We play disc golf in Circle C.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I admire the most about them is that I've seen them change their minds about things, and that's hard to do. And, I'd say as far as religion and politics and
Hmm.
how they interact with people, I think they've learned a lot. And when I say change their minds too, like in my mind, more towards what's true. So I want to be that way as well.
Yeah. What was
Feel
the
like,
last thing you changed your mind about? Something substantial that you felt one way and then now you feel differently?
man, just write so much. That's hard. Oh man, I change my mind all the time, but nothing's coming to mind.
I can ask you a different question.
Yeah.
It might be easier. You can come back to that one. What's something you and I disagree about? We don't know each other super well, but we know each other enough to have had disagreements already.
Invite me on a 5-mile hike with the 50-pound kettlebell.
And then we'll disagree.
Yeah, let's talk about politics. That's a
Yeah.
great idea. I don't know. That I feel like every time we've talked in terms of how, like, our goals for the United States government or families like align. Like people disagree about priorities and
Mm.
facts, right? And I feel like when I talk to you, our priorities are pretty darn similar.
Yeah.
Like on the politics thing, there's some facts about who's a better leader or something that we have disagreed on. But I mean, that's complicated, and I just feel bad for people. I feel like I'm a reasonably smart guy that spends so much time on this stuff, and like I don't know who to trust,
Yeah.
or especially these days, like it's just accepted to say completely different things than what you actually do or mean. So
Mm.
sifting through all that,
Sifting through it's an impossibility, I
think
think.
so.
You sort of look at the data that you have available and you make an educated guess based on what you see, knowing there's a bunch I don't see. There's a lot of dynamics here I can't keep up with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So some of the stuff I feel like I would want to convince you of facts wise. Like, gosh, I was thinking about it, and it's like, it's not even in the last 4 years. It's like keeping track of what people say over the last 8 years. I have these impressions for about what they really mean by things.
yeah.
And sometimes I can explain what I think those are, but and that's a hugely frustrating thing for a nerd like me. Like when you feel a certain way, or you're just not good at explaining it.
Yeah.
But sometimes, I mean, I just feel better because I think it's complicated.
Yeah. It's certainly complicated. And I find that the times that I can have a healthy conversation about something that's complicated and controversial, like politics, if I recognize, okay, I share the thesis with this person, or I share the result of my thesis statement, like we would vote for the same person, I can have a conversation with that person, even if they don't consume a whole lot of data to make their decision.
Yeah.
If I see somebody that doesn't consume a whole lot of data to make their decision and there's a disagreement there,
That's hard. Yeah.
yeah, I just can't even engage because you need 3 hours and a lot of trust. We have to find other stuff that we disagree about first, just so I know how you fight.
Sure.
And then we can talk about topics that are controversial and tough to think through. But then occasionally you'll find somebody that's a deep thinker that doesn't make flippant decisions, at least to the extent they can avoid it, and reached a totally different conclusion than you. That interests me.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking to have more of those conversations where I can. Although I've had it happen lately where some people that I really respect a lot, would call very good friends, haven't talked to me in several weeks and won't return phone calls. And, I might talk to them and just hear, yeah, I need some space. I need some time, as though I'm going to come dunk a football on them. I just don't, that I have a tough time with.
Yeah. It depends how long it lasts, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I've gotten emotional about things, but I just I can't have conversation that is like kind and going after the truth right now. And I don't feel like I've ever felt that way for more than a couple weeks. But
what's an acceptable period of time for you where you wouldn't just look at a friendship as like, well, I guess that friendship's no more?
it's a long time for me, man.
Yeah.
My best friend, who was my best man, like he just got a new job, and so sometimes it's like a month, and I'm like, dang, I haven't texted in a long time. But to me, that doesn't matter, and maybe I'm not being a good friend, but he's still my buddy. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to him if I need him for something important. So, but we do need to get back to hanging out again. But
You need some proximity to maintain friendships with that level of closeness. Like my buddy Buck that was in here the other day, he and I were very, very close when I was in Austin. We spent several mornings a week together at Barton Springs. Just, when you're with somebody on that level of frequency, all the pleasantries are out of the way. So when you see them, you're just talking about a real topic. You're not catching up on how the kids and the wife are doing. When you don't have that proximity, you need bigger blocks of time to get caught up with somebody. But man, I probably have a tougher time with it than I care to admit, because when you feel like you've got a relationship with somebody that's trusted and built over years of having good conversations, difficult conversations, and then all of a sudden you can't get a phone call returned. Maybe I'm being petty.
No, man, we were having small group the other day. I don't think you were there, and it was a parable about forgiveness, which I thought was just one of the most straightforward and boring ones, and it turned out to be this great small group, and I got a ton out of it. But I mean, one of the things I was just like, man, I haven't been hurt that much in my life. I'm grateful for that. I don't know why that is, but
you're just abundantly forgiving.
No, I mean, I just haven't had that much to forgive, I feel like, but it's probably because I have trouble getting really close to people, and so.
What's your longest tenured friendship?
I mean, I grew up in Austin, so I'm still good friends with people that I met when I was 5 or 6. I can think of 3 or 4.
All still local?
Yeah. And so my family has moved out of state.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing because, I mean, I was a terrible big brother at times, and like my next brother down, when we were tiny, he like took a baseball bat to my bedroom door several times. And then right before I got married, like a few months, he was getting into MMA, and I loved boxing just casually in high school, no idea what we were doing, but so he got me right in the eye with the MMA glove. They have the basically knuckle straight to the eye, and it swelled all the way closed. It was all purple.
Right before your wedding?
Yeah, so Elizabeth was happy, but it was like he had that coming his whole life too. And,
yeah.
I mean, it was just such a, I just leaned into it right when he was doing the uppercut. What was I doing? But, anyways, but just, I mean, it's just cool to talk to him. I think he's agnostic now is how I would categorize it. And but hey, I can vent to him about church, or we disagree on politics some, and we can talk about it. And so just those people that you trust, like, hey, we may be mad at each other about this conversation, but you're still my friend, and I know you care about me afterwards. That's super important.
Yeah. How many brothers do you have?
I think it's 7 boys and 5 girls.
7 boys, 5 girls.
Yeah, the youngest 4 are all boys. The youngest is, I think, a senior in high school.
Okay. Senior in high school. What of them do you still have like a close relationship with?
Man, I mean, I feel like a terrible brother because it's not as close as it should be.
With 12 siblings, that's a full-time job.
I mean, for some, it's almost more like an uncle relationship. But so my Ashley is my next sister, and we hung out a ton in high school and had some of the same friends. And, I was a dick, and I would like try to date her friends, and not always be the best brother and all that stuff. But
is that being a bad brother? Trying to date your sister's friends?
I don't know. It depends how you go about it and whether you're serious or not. But we play volleyball together, and like I still enjoy volleyball to this day.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she runs an Amazon business, and she's in Mexico. So again, I don't see her that often. We probably text 4 or 5 times a year, but then when she comes, we can sit down and talk for 2 or 3 hours easy.
Yeah.
And then the next brother down is the one who punched me in the eye, and he's in Oregon. The one after that is way cooler than me and is in a band and has all the tattoos. And then the next sister actually works for the same law firm as me. She came on a few years ago, and she's in Utah and rock climbs and works part-time. And it was a pretty sweet life. And Amy's the next one down. She has the next grandkid besides mine. Yeah, I feel like for that many kids, there's a lot of strong personalities too.
Yeah. What's the age spread between oldest and youngest?
So I'm 36 and the youngest
36
is 18.
and 18, so almost 20 years. Basically in different generations at that point.
Yeah.
I see what you mean by the cool uncle dynamic.
Or the
uncle,
but
yeah, the weird uncle.
Now I have dirt bikes, and
yeah,
I still am okay at basketball. So. But that's rough. Getting blocked by your little brother for the first time in basketball is a whole new experience.
Oh yeah, that happened recently.
Oh, that was probably 3 or 4 years ago. A lot of the youngest 4 are boys, and I think they're all taller than me. So.
Talk to me about parenting a little bit. How often do you and your wife talk about the way in which you want to parent your kids? Is it a frequent topic of discussion? Or do you just sort of go with the flow and do your best?
I'm probably to go with the flow, too much so. I think we talk once a month at least. There's that friction of like, she likes how she was raised more than me, and I see the value in that, just like simple kind of faith stuff and not being exposed to a lot of things. But I've had a lot more experience with friends and youth that I've worked with, where they get to high school or college or wherever they can make their decisions for the first time and just go crazy because they. So I feel like that slow exposure is super important. And then also, I won't sugarcoat whatever my faith is. I won't believe something because I'm scared either. Like that was a change for me probably in my 20s. Like, I'm not going to have faith just because I'm scared what happens when I die. And I am scared of that. But I just want to know what the truth is about it to the extent that I can. And there's things that you can't know. And so, some days I'm even like, I'd put numbers on it. What's the percentage chance God is real? I don't know. And so I want to be honest about like how grateful I am and how I look out in the universe, and like, it's freaking amazing. There's a lot of bad things happen, but a lot of great things too. And so I hope it's all real, the things that I believe. And so that's a tough way to talk to your kids about faith.
Yeah.
And so Elizabeth and I have a lot of conversations about like how do you be authentic?
We have talked about it recently through the lens of Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Because when you explain to a 9-year-old boy who asks you directly, Daddy, I want you to tell me the truth. I want to know the truth.
Yep.
Is there a Santa Claus? And you explain to him the benefit of the myth of Santa Claus. That explanation can also serve to explain God in a way to a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the talking about one can quickly slide into the other. And then you can just totally shatter any foundational belief that your kid has. I don't know how to walk that line.
Yeah.
Because I'm like you. If I think something is true, I'm going to tell you I think this is true, and I can probably tell you why I think it's true. Yep. And I can probably tell you how I felt prior to believing this was true, and what path I took to figuring out that seems like truth to me. But how to explain that to a 9-year-old in a way that's productive for him when I'm figuring it out for myself at 38, I don't know.
I just be honest as much as I can, but I'm probably too honest. So.
Yeah. Is that a source of friction for you and your wife, or is it sort of like the the opposing viewpoints of she wants to shelter as much as possible and you want to not shelter as much as possible creates a good middle ground?
I don't know, man. I mean, she's awesome. Like, she thinks more like a dude than any other woman I've probably met. And so she's pretty rational about stuff. And like, I'm the one that shuts down and doesn't want to talk when I'm upset.
Yeah.
She wants to talk it out. So that's been great for me. I mean, it's a source of friction, but I feel like we trust each other more and more.
Do y'all have a fighting method? You and Elizabeth?
Not really, man. I don't know.
Not one you've agreed on, like,
No,
when we
not
fight, this
like,
is how we fight?
When I get mad, I don't want to talk to her, and she hates that. And so that goes on until I get over it and I'm ready to talk.
So you dictate terms.
I guess.
We'll talk when I'm ready.
Yeah. I mean, there's I'm kind of proud of the fact I don't think she's ever seen me like all the way mad. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I mean, I don't want to say things that I don't really mean. I mean, I think some really hurtful things sometimes, spur of the moment, that I don't think I mean, so I don't see any reason to say them. So
Yeah.
to some extent, that cooling down is healthy. But when I make it last too long, it's not loving my wife.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that whole thing about like, is the myth of God a good thing, even if he wasn't real? I don't know. People would be like, oh, you're not all in, or you're not hardcore enough. But like, that's a valid question, right? Because people pick on the church and stuff, but like, there's a lot about America that is based on Christian principles, I think. And I think the church did a better job in the past of like trying to be a blessing to the world. I'm pulled towards some of those, like, I think it's Presbyterians maybe, that are just emphasize being good citizens so much. So that's important too.
As a result of your faith, the emphasis of being a good citizen because you're a Christian?
Right. I don't know. I just feel like the evangelical church has focused so much on, like, it's complicated what it means to believe Jesus, right? But they've focused on, once you say your prayer or whatever you do, you're good. And the flip side of that is being legalistic and focusing on behavior, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It probably swings back and forth, but I feel like right now we're probably not focusing enough on behavior, which causes us to not be a blessing to the world.
Yeah. The questioning thing, you touched on a couple things there I'd want to talk about with you. One, the questioning of the value of the myth of God was kind of an entry point for me back to faith. Was that it was okay to ask questions. Because when you're raised in the context I was raised in, you don't ask questions. And if you do, be really careful how you ask them. Because if you're asking too much, then you're questioning your faith, and you just don't ever do that.
I mean, to that, I just think, like, if you didn't need faith and to have questions, like, the Bible would not have the word faith and hope and believe in it. It would be, this is how it is. These are the things that you know.
Yeah, it would be a dictate.
That's not how it is. But if the Bible's your holy book, I think you should be okay with having questions.
Yeah. I think it was Jefferson that wrote a letter to a friend of his son. I think that was the story. He was mentoring a friend of his son, and they had talked about the subject of God.
I think we talked about that,
Yeah, and he said that he was unsure, but that be there a God, he must surely prefer honest questioning to blindfolded fear. That was
which is in the Bible a bunch of times. Don't be afraid. And it's hard. But especially with the way that Christianity gets mixed up with politics in America right now sometimes. Politics is all about making you afraid to get you to the polls. So that doesn't mesh well.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that strike you with sort of the rise of, I guess you'd call it Christian nationalism? There's this rise in people finding a faith or returning to their faith that's, from my level of awareness, seems to be growing. But if that is run amok, it ends you up in a bad place too, it seems like. You have an opinion on that?
Christian nationalism does,
Yeah.
or coming back to your faith?
No, Christian nationalism, where it gets too intertwined in your political
Yeah.
bent.
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked about that, and there's all kinds of levels of what people mean by that. At the level of like, we should be a Christian nation, have explicitly Christian laws, and have the Bible as part of our legal system or something. I mean, I just think that's such a progressive idea. It's never worked before. If you look at the Church of England or Germany, it never worked out for the church when it got really involved in politics, and didn't seem to work out for the people either. Um, so it's like similar to communism to me. Like, it sounds pretty good. Communism is like the ultimate think about other people first, right? I just think humans only have the capacity to do that in their family in a very small circle. And so, like, you look at the history of communism, and we can keep saying like, oh, they didn't do it right. We just need to try again and tweak these things. I feel like we're doing the same thing with Christian nationalism in that form of like, why would we think it would work? And if you're progressive, you think you can get things like that to work. I guess at the level of, voting for laws that help other people, take care of the poor, or sort of hospitable and fair as much as we can be to immigrants, foreigners. That makes a lot of sense to me. In terms of sort of imposing your morality on other people, I just think that giving people liberty and freedom is the loving thing to do. But that's kind of just based on observing how things work.
Yeah.
I don't know, if you force somebody to do something, does that have any moral value or not? I don't know. But also, I don't know, I'm getting super abstract here. But also Americans, and we just like don't follow laws that we don't like. That's part of being an American. So
Yeah.
focusing too much on the legal system and politics is like you're not going to have a good country if you don't have good people in it that want to do the right thing and work hard and things like that.
Does it require a religious framework to do the right thing and work hard and all that?
I think there's some countries that have a pretty good framework that are mostly atheist. If you look at, I don't know, some of the Nordic countries, maybe they have a lot easier than we do because they're sort of all look the same and speak the same language. That's one of America's strengths, is that how different we all are, but it makes things more challenging. I don't know. I mean, I just like I said, I walk outside and I see God, I think, in nature, and I see God in hard work and fair laws and things like that. I know a lot of people that I guess are not religious, but I just really hope, because I don't know how God interacts with different people, but I hope when he shows up in their lives, I think they're such sort of righteous people that if he shows up, they're going to be like, oh, you're the guy that I've wanted my whole life or been pursuing. So, the Bible says like the law of God is written on everybody's heart. So yeah, I think we can get a pretty strong framework without being explicitly religious at all. But I'd say there's a lot of good stuff in the Bible that helps too.
Yeah. Okay, so I asked you earlier if you had heard God speak audibly.
Yeah.
And with the exception of the one time in church that you felt like he was telling you, okay, this is the month, you haven't heard any audible evidence of a God. When you feel like God speaks to you, how does he speak to you?
Yeah, so like I said, I think I've had some great mentors and people that I trust, gotten some awesome advice. I've read the Bible a lot of times. I think there's some really good stuff in there. I think it's I used to think it was more complicated. I mean, like love God and love other people. I don't know how to love God either. I don't know exactly what that means, other than, interacting with the world and how it is, not how I want it to be. Trying to find truth. And most of that is interacting with other people. And that's hard as an introvert.
Yep.
But, the basic stuff in the Bible of like put other people first.
Yeah.
That's super hard, but I don't know. It's like when I do that, things go well and my relationships go well. So that makes sense to me. So if you're talking about a relationship with God, if that's what it means, that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the thing that I struggle with is I pray a lot. I start my day reading scripture.
Yeah.
And before I get out of bed, I pray, and I pray about my day, and I pray about my ability to be a dad and a husband and a CEO and a friend and all those things. And very rarely, though it does happen, but very rarely do I feel like I'm hearing a direction from God, or I'm hearing, or I'm feeling that He's pushing me one way or another. It's not real frequent. And the struggle part of it is I have talked myself into doing things before, thinking it was the right thing to do, and being convinced of it. This is the right thing for me to do, only to have it fail catastrophically. Sure. And then I've had circumstances where I felt like God led me to do this. They sound the same. The voice in my head saying, this is what I need to be doing, and God's nudges. The difference between the two only is found in the result.
Sure.
And maybe I'm not zooming out far enough on the things that I failed at to see God in them, and not that I was just talking myself into it, right? But like with you and your potential political aspirations, where you just feel like that's a thing you could take responsibility for and do something of meaning or of use to your fellow citizenry or whatever. I feel that way about this, about podcasting.
Yeah.
That like, I don't have an aversion to talking about things that would be embarrassing to most people, like troubles with porn. I don't have a tough time having a conversation with a buddy with a camera in the room that, pretty quickly into it, I just forget that it's there.
Yep.
So I look at that and I go, well, I try to be a good man. I try to be a good dad. I try to be a good husband, CEO, friend, all those things. And I'm willing to talk about it. So that's God telling me that I should just go into podcasting.
Yeah.
But hell, man, I don't know. That could also be that I enjoy doing it, and I'm convincing myself that that's the right thing to do. Meanwhile, God's screaming at me from a mountaintop, stop doing that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I like to think that He doesn't care that much.
Yeah.
And He's maybe a little excited, because I've come down pretty hard on the free will side, I guess. I just, I can make robots, though, but I can't make people with free will. Or I have no idea how that would work, or how He would do that. And so that's cool to me. And so I kind of hope He gets excited about the choices we make sometimes. And what we see as a failure doesn't really matter that we failed, maybe. I don't know if I run for politics. The chances of winning as an independent is super low with my personality and speaking skills. And so, I mean, if I did, that might be a sign from God. But if I feel like it's the right thing, I'm going to do it. And like everybody says these days, like, you learn from failure and all that. So it's hard to say if that was actually a negative when it happens.
Yeah.
Try to be grateful through all of it. I think the harder part is when, I'm just like, I'm so grateful for my life personally, but you get older and you see older family members and friends go through stuff, and like, that's just hard, and you do the best you can to help out. But all those questions, it's like, how would a good God let these things happen? And that's when you'd love to hear some kind of voice. That's harder for me than trying to figure out what I should do next, I guess.
You feel like you would recognize that it was God speaking to you if you heard an audible voice?
God, I don't know, man. Try to do it again and see.
Yeah. You're the scientific method.
Right.
You want to know it was real.
Right. But I think like if the miracles and stuff, like that's not for people like me, and it's not to prove something.
Hmm.
It's probably a personal comfort type thing, which is just as important. Probably.
Explain what you're talking about there. Miracles aren't for a guy like you.
Well, like you can't, like by definition, you can't scientific method a miracle, right? You can't. Then it wouldn't be a miracle. It would just be physics or something.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, they don't do anything to like prove the Bible's real or Jesus was God.
Hmm.
I'm not saying they can't. It's just this. It's not convincing for me. It's not helpful for me.
Yeah.
But if I heard God's voice audibly, it wouldn't help me like prove God is real or something, because I could be schizophrenic or something. But I think I could get a lot of personal comfort out of it, and I think that's when I, felt like God told me we were going to have a kid that month. It's like I have no idea if it was or not, but I do look back at that and take some comfort. Maybe God cares about me. Maybe He has plans for me, even if they're not specific. That can be encouraging too.
How, if you're the kind of person that wants empirical proof or wants the ability to test a hypothesis and know that you have the right conclusion, how does somebody with that wiring settle on faith as a maintainable belief system?
Right.
Because you have to know, in the course of human history, nobody has ever known for sure.
Yeah.
Until the moment of their death. And then maybe not even, maybe if there's just a black hole on the other side, then you're still not going to know. So how do you grapple with this side of you that wants to know the truth that can be proven and repeated, and this side of you that maintains its faith?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I grew up in it, right? So there's a point in everybody's life, I think, that grew up in it. It's like, is this just because of how I grew up or not? I've read the Quran and the Tao Te Ching and Confucius, and probably not all the holy books, but I've read a lot of them just to see what else is out there. The Book of Mormon. I mean, I take a lot of comfort, like I said, in the Bible, talking about faith and hope, because I can do those. Then there's a separate thing of just being so frustrated about how many things we can't know, but everybody deals with that. So, so I mean, I don't know what to say to that.
It's just a constant wrestling.
My witness and my testimony is just not great. I have friends that have crazy stories of how they came to Jesus. But I think there's some value in just like, it's worked for me, and God's been there. I don't know.
I disagree with it not being a good testimony, though, because for a person that was raised the way that I was raised, to reach a conclusion as an adult man, like, this is probably a topic I need to have a real belief system about. I need to grapple with it.
Right.
Knowing that there are people that are strong in their faith enough to be able to speak about it with conviction, who also ask the same kind of questions that I ask and have the same kind of doubts that I have. Sort of if it's nothing else, it's relatable, I don't see a lower value in that testimony than somebody who heard God speak audibly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in the past, I thought it would give me credibility too, and just like, I mean, I remember, wanting to get into trouble back in the day, and it's like, oh, I need to not do this so people take me seriously or whatever. And like looking at politics now, like you can get away with murder and still people still vote for you. So I kind of roll my eyes at that idea, but I don't know. Sometimes I think it gives me some credibility. It's like I've changed my mind about a lot of things, but my faith hasn't really changed since I was a kid.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic by nature?
Oh, pessimistic.
Pessimistic.
But I work on being grateful all the time. And
yeah.
There's a lot of things I'm optimistic about. But I'm an engineer, so like you find problems to solve. And I'm pretty hard on myself, so I have to work on that, and that helps me not be hard on other people.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about your future and the future world that your kids are going to inherit, what makes you optimistic? Or what evidence do you see, since you're an evidence guy?
Yeah.
What evidence do you see in the world that now we're going to be all right?
Yeah, I mean, just when you say that, like, because I'm pessimistic,
I
like
know.
climate change is the first thing that pops into my head, right? But then you see like all the amazing things in biology, how things adapt, and um, humans are scrappy, and I think there's things that are going to be harder on my kids, just depending on how fast we switch to different energy sources and stuff, and how much that costs. Um, it may be harder for them than it was for me. But like in terms of optimism, I mean, I just, like I said, you look out at nature and it's so amazing. And I see people make right choices. And I got really pessimistic during COVID because I felt like people went crazy about different things and everything was fear driven. But since then, it's like I've met, I don't know, more than 10 families where I just respect how they're raising their kids so much. And I can run my mouth about politics or religion and they don't get offended. Um, if my kids are around people like that, they're going to be fine.
Yeah, it's a good reason to be optimistic. Mike, thanks for taking time to do this, man.
Yeah, man.
We just did an hour and 10 minutes, so
Nice.
you survived it.
Yeah,
We'll have to do it again.
we will.
I'll think of some good topics to come and prod you on, try to further ruin your political future.
Nice. Yeah, I struggle with man, we talked about faith a lot, but I want to figure out, I've told Elizabeth, like, I want to figure out the introverts that don't feel comfortable in church and it doesn't make sense to them. Like, how can I hang out with them? So that's like, we just did a workout at my house this Saturday, which people from church came to, but like that kind of thing, and just everybody brings something positive. It doesn't even have to be faith-based, but that's what I've been thinking about lately. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it's cool. Well, thanks again, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.